Unsolved crimes, missing people. When the case goes cold, no leads, no witnesses, no fingerprints, no DNA. Where do you go? What do you do? Well, there is sometimes a last resort, so-called psychic detectives. Are they working miracles or just plain frauds? Let's go straight to a so-called psychic detective here in the studio with me. Not only Peggy Goebel, a crime victim who lost her sister many years ago at the hands of a murderer, and psychic Nancy Weber. Nancy, back to that time, back to 1987, when Peggy first contacted you, what do you do first?
She came to me. I didn't know what she was coming about. I tell people, don't tell me. I sat opposite her and I felt overwhelmed by horrible feelings and grief. So the first thing I did was say to her that I felt that there was a tragedy in her family, recent loss, and it happened in a horrible way. And Peggy started crying, and we spoke. I don't remember the words I said to her or the words she said, but I talked about the idea that the suspect, chief suspect, would be her boyfriend, but he was not guilty. And that I could not tell her anything else about the...
The chief suspect would be victim Elizabeth's boyfriend?
Yes.
Okay.
And that he
was he the chief suspect at the time?
Yes.
That's not unusual. Police normally look at husband, boyfriend, lover.
Right. Right. And I told her that I could not tell her anything about the case itself. That if she would please go back and speak to whoever is working the case, and I will give her police references and names for them to call and verify who I am, because I didn't know who it would be, and that I would be happy to help out. And I got a call immediately, I think the next day, from then Captain David Heater out of the prosecutor's office. And I recognized the voice and the name from 5 years before, when I worked on a case of an unsolved murder.
And then what happened?
And he asked me if I would come out, and I went to the crime scene. It was still a crime scene. And as I walked in, it was a first-floor apartment, and at the landing to the first floor, I looked up the staircase, and I said, the murderer lives upstairs. And he looked at me, and he said, well, there's a 19-year-old. I said, no, it's not him. There's an adult male.
Wait. You walked in to the building?
The apartment building, the landing, and I saw up the stairs a sense of a murderer. I didn't see anything. I saw energy that told me it's the murderer up there. And then I got a vision as I walked into Elizabeth's living room, where I saw 5'10", reddish-brown hair, scar on his right cheek, Western belt buckle. And I went to the bedroom. I didn't tell them at the time. Went to the bedroom where she was murdered. And I described the rape and the murder in details. And they looked at me, and true to how sometimes they would speak, they'd say, confirm. Confirm, confirm. I said, okay, let's go back to headquarters and talk. So we went back, and I went over what I felt was the murderer. And I said, he killed her probably around 3 a.m. or so. And they said, no, she was killed around 11. I said, no, she was killed around 3. And they looked at me and said, well, there's a man living upstairs. I said, first name John? They said, yes. I said, last name begins with the letter R, single syllable. They said, Reese is his last name. I said, that's him. And they looked at me and said, do you remember speaking about him before? I said, no, but he's a serial murderer, and he's tried to kill before, and he's killed before. Then Dave or somebody else looked at me and said, well, you're describing him again for the second time in 5 years. I said, well, he is. And I said, but it's him. And they said, well, he doesn't have a scar. He doesn't wear a Western belt buckle. And I looked at them and I said, you're blind. Go back and look. I said, and if he does, then think about what I just said, please. So they went back and looked and saw the scar and saw the Western belt buckle. And then the autopsy report came back. It was about 10 days after death. And it showed she died, I think, at 3:15 a.m. And they looked at each other. And of course, they
determined that by the last meal or the degree of morbidity in the limbs.
Exactly. And so Dave Heater and Sergeant Tom Trainer from the state police decided to bring him back in. And they brought him back in, they videoed it. They had no evidence. I told them that there would be a hammer that she was killed with and that it would be in a swamp. I drew where the swamp was. They went and found a hammer with blood on it. It wasn't her blood. nobody ever did anything to find out if it matched anything else.